Joan by Carol M Mottershead, Chapter 26. It all happened so fast. 1 minute I was lost in my memories. Next, my heart almost stopped. I suddenly remembered the headline on the poster. Heads to roll for the last time in France. Beneath it, a photograph of Punchinella. The newspaper article. Nicholas, my son, killed by his father. Ring, ring. Ring, ring. No one was answering. Ring, ring. Ring, ring. Why wasn't she answering? Ring, ring. Alison, I screamed in my head. Yes, hello, said the voice on the other end of the telephone. I remembered, was all I could say. I put the phone down. I couldn't think who else to call. Waiting for her to arrive seemed to take ages. I was remembering everything now. I remembered the screaming uncontrollably. I remembered the sounds, the ringing of the bells from the ambulance. Voices calling my name over and over again. I couldn't speak. It's strange how your mind works. The only person I could think of ringing was Alison. She was the only person left in my life I could turn to. Dear Alison. She'd been my saviour once before, back in 1965, and here I was again, imposing on her kindness. She'd never asked anything of me by way of explanation, and I have volunteered so little. It was a wonder we'd stayed friends all these years. I'd woken up in hospital once before, months after I'd received that fateful blow to my temple, rendering me unconscious. Apparently I had not been expected to live. Punchinella had been arrested, awaiting the outcome of my condition. If I had died, he would have been hung without trial. But instead, he'd escaped and taken Nicholas with him. I hadn't known for how long I'd been unconscious, only that the staff didn't want me to leave straight away. My recovery had been some sort of miracle, they'd said. They wanted to study me for a while longer. But all I wanted was to find my son. Where had Punchinella taken my son? I discharged myself from hospital, only to find myself homeless. I'd been unconscious for so long. Punchinella had run away and paid no bills. Our home had been repossessed by the bank and sold. A neighbour who had heard that I was still fighting for my life managed to claim a few of my personal belongings. Clothes, some money, and by some amazing piece of good fortune, my puppets. There was a letter. Only one message left. From Nicholas. My dearest mother, I am sorry. I have let you down in the worst possible way. I could not protect you. Forgive me. Your loving son, Nicholas. Sadness filled my heart, for why would Nicholas leave me here to die alone, if that is what they did indeed believe? He'd been as angry at Punchinella as I had been. He wouldn't have gone willingly, would he? How did Punchinella persuade him to leave? There were too many questions running through my mind, but I had to be practical. I needed a roof over my head. Where could I go? Who could I turn to? There was no one. I could see no other choice, and as much as it galled me, there was only one option open to me, only one place I could think of going. The church. Evening mass would be over. The place would be closing soon. At least it would be drier and warmer inside than out. I had one major issue to overcome, something I had struggled with almost all my life, ever since Mother died. God. I had blamed God for taking my mother from me, leaving me feeling so alone, with a father who I barely knew, and a governess who, although a lovely woman, could never replace Mother. Someone must have been watching over me, for this is where I first met Alison. I'd stood at the entrance to the church and reluctantly opened the door with its heavy, horseshoe-shaped handle and entered. I'd looked around anxiously, irrationally half expecting to be struck by lightning for my hypocrisy, yet knowing it wasn't possible. I laughed at myself and told myself to stop being foolish. As I entered the sparsely lit narthex of the church, I automatically turned to bless myself with holy water before entering the nave. The water seemed to sting as it touched my forehead. It's ordinary water, I told myself. It was more likely my feelings of guilt, for I was the one who stopped believing there was a God. I was the hypocrite now turning to a God I professed not to believe in for years, looking for help. I berated myself for my hypocrisy. I had attended church whenever the rest of the troop went, but that was more out of a sense of duty than from a desire to praise an unseen God. I had tried to believe in the beginning. I truly had. But God had forsaken me, I felt sure. I was alone. I had taken only a few steps into the nave and looked at the altar with its simple crucifix, the face of Christ reproachfully looking down on me. Why have I come here? I shook my head. Why was I expecting you to help me? You who have forsaken me all these years. I admonished Jesus to his face as he hung on the crucifix. What gives you the right to look down on me, judge my life? I may not be perfect, I may have sinned in your eyes, but I've tried to live a good life. I have tried to care for my family the best I can. I've always worked to put food on the table when times have been hard. A woman's voice called from within the darkening recesses of the church. Is someone there? The voice called out. No, it's all right, I'm just leaving, I called, turning towards her. Hold on, I'm just closing up. I'll see you out, the voice replied. I waited, hovering in the fight or flight mode, not sure what to do. Where did I think I was going at this time of night, I wondered. Ah, there you are, my dear. So what are you doing in a church at this hour? Asked the owner of the voice. I stood silent. Come with me. You look cold, she said. The lady was only small, but she seemed to take charge of me for a moment, guiding me out of the church, her hand gently moving me towards the door. We take it in turns to turn out the lights after evening prayers, she chattered pleasantly on, filling the silence. I allowed myself to be guided through the doors and stood as instructed whilst doors were securely locked. Come, she said. I followed. Why I followed this kind old woman I didn't know, but I was cold. I had nowhere to go. Not tonight, anyway. Tonight I needed somewhere to stay. Warmth against the cold autumn night air. The lady continued to chatter all the way home. Here we are, home sweet home. Come on in, you look frozen. I'll just poke up this fire, then I'll put the kettle on. Sit yourself down. And she was off, leaving me standing in front of a now blazing fire. My name's Alison. What's yours? Asked Alison, re-entering the room with a tray of hot tea and biscuits, with a few sandwiches on the side. I started to say Judy for a moment, but a sudden sense of defiance came over me, and I corrected myself. "My name is Joan," I replied. "Well, Joan, I don't know about you, but I've had a very long day and I'm starving. I've done a few sandwiches, or there's biscuits. How'd you like your tea?" Alison chattered on. My mind had been working 20 to the dozen all day, trying to work things out in my head. I'd given little thought to food until now, but at Alison's persistence, I realised I was indeed thirsty and hungry. Eat, she insisted. "There'll be time for talk later. Now, just you relax and make yourself at home. We'll have our food and a cup of tea, then I'll get you some blankets. I take it you've got nowhere to go tonight?" I shook my head. "Then that's it. You're staying here the night. Now, how's about a top-up?" Alison asked. Alison kept talking and talking all evening. She told me about her friend Erin, who was something to do with helping women in need, a women's movement or something. I wasn't taking it all in. The challenges of the day were now showing in the exhaustion my body now felt. I tried to listen. I tried to keep my eyes open. I thought I was awake, but it was morning before I was aware of anything else. I'd been sat in an armchair, my neck twisted as my head laid against the shoulder of the chair. A blanket had been placed around my now aching body. There was a pale glow of dying embers in the fireplace. The dawning light showing from around the edges of the heavy curtains drawn across the windows. I moved to straighten up, and a pain shot up into my head as the blood rushed past my twisted neck. Alison entered the room all full of morning cheer. I wondered where she got her energy from. She seemed to have an abundance of it so early this morning. She apologised for leaving me in the chair with just a blanket, but apparently I'd fallen asleep, sitting up listening to her talk. Now it was my turn to apologise. She insisted I ate a hearty breakfast to set me up for the day, with plenty of cups of tea being proffered. "Everything can be solved with a nice cup of tea inside you," she said. A woman after my own heart, I thought. Alison didn't push for any further explanations, and I had none to offer, but being the kind soul she was, she offered to let me stay for a while, for as long as I needed. "Erin and myself, we and the other women at the Gold Hawk, don't like to ask any questions," she said. "We believe a woman will tell us what she wants us to know when she's ready. Have you any plans, my dear?" I began telling her about waking up in hospital, about being hit, then stopped. Embarrassed to admit I'd been hit by my husband, even by accident. The door to the truth was now open. It was time to talk to someone, and this kind lady made it so much easier to open up. I felt ashamed. I wept. She listened. There was no look of judgment on her face, only concern for a fellow human being in pain. She handed me a kerchief with only a single comment, no judgment. "You are guilty only of one thing, Joan. You've loved too much. You've tried to make your marriage work. There's no shame in that." I went to the bank hoping they had information for me. I had hoped there would have been some money left from the sale of the house, and indeed there was. Unfortunately, it was held in a suspension account of some kind and would take a while to sort out. I'd need proof of ID before they could release any funds also. There lay a problem. All my worldly goods had gone. No passport, no driver's license that they asked for, no utility bills. I'd been in hospital and the house had been razed to the ground by the time I got out of hospital. All I had was my puppets. I explained what I could to Alison later that night. I told her about my puppets. I told her how I could earn an income with my puppets. I'd done it before. She assured me all was well. Pay what you can when you can, she suggested. No pressure. There were children in the refuge, and I offered to perform my puppet show to them. They were such a pleasure to play to, so appreciative. It felt good to see their smiling faces. I love to be able to make a child happy, even if it's just for a short while. The next few weeks were a crazy time. I had very little time to spend searching for Nicholas. I was performing my shows in nearby parks. Alison knew a few people who would book private parties, and soon I was able to pay a regular fee to Goldhawk, a donation they preferred to call it, and put money aside towards a place of my own. Word of mouth soon got out about how good my shows were, and it wasn't long before I was being invited to perform in more wealthy homes. I was finally able to put more time into searching for Nicholas, all to no avail. Life fell into a general routine of work, search, sleep, with Alison supporting me all the time. Then in 1977, I received a summons from the Master of the Household on behalf of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I was to perform at a private party they were holding at St. James's Palace. Only a select group of friends and immediate family were invited, with only the best in entertainments attending. It was so hush-hush that not even the press were told about it. The star of the night was none other than the King of Rock and Roll. He was my favourite celebrity. Charming and gallant, handsome and colourful, he reminded me of Pulcinella when we first met. He was performing his latest album for Her Majesty, entitled, and this is what caught my interest, I Was Born 10,000 Years Ago. I admit to wondering where he got such an idea from. The evening was going well, and eventually it was my turn to perform. I chose one of my earlier stories, the ones when we were a simple, happy family, one with baby, Pulcinella, young John, Scaramouche and Toby, and of course myself. I was always guaranteed a good response to those earlier stories where there was less violence and just music, song and dance with a bit of cheekiness to make me smile with my memory. The lights dimmed as my show began. Spotlights lit up, and as I looked out across the guests in front of me, that's when I first saw his eyes. Could it be, I wondered, Nicholas? I faltered for a moment, forgetting where I was. The stage lights momentarily blinded me. When my eyes adjusted and I looked out again, the face, those oh so familiar eyes, they were gone. I mentally shook myself. The show must go on. The children, Her Majesty, were waiting. I had never tried to finish the show so quickly before. The audience kept shouting at the puppets in that pantomime-style way that I had become well known for encouraging. The show took longer as a result. I don't know how I managed to get through it, except to say that I was responding purely by rote. I couldn't get off the stage quick enough. When the show finally ended, I tried searching everywhere I was allowed to go, looking for the one person I so dearly longed to see. Security kept turning me towards the room where all the acts were to meet the Queen. It was the opportunity of a lifetime for many to speak with Her Majesty, as she graciously thanked the performers for their contribution to her party. But I had met many royals in my time, and enjoyed meeting every one of them. But this time all I could think about was my Nicholas. I was so sure it was his eyes I saw in the audience. I felt irritated and annoyed by the long wait. I looked hopefully round the room, along the row of entertainers before and after me in the line. Nicholas was nowhere to be seen. I walked home alone, feeling foolish. I had performed my favourite story, the story of my family, our happy times. I'd been working hard. It had to have been my imagination. As I walked home, I felt an odd tingle of excitement. Could it be that Nicholas is nearby? No, I told myself, I dare not get my hopes up. I dare not allow myself to even think he may be close. I heard footsteps behind me. I heard someone call out, but in the darkness of the London side streets where I now lived, I suddenly felt afraid. I walked faster and faster. The other footsteps quickened. The entrance to my gated community home was in sight. I ran the last few yards, hoping to unlock the gates and get inside as quickly as I could, afraid the stranger following me might catch me up. Breathlessly, I hid in the shadows behind the gate. The footsteps went silent. I held my breath so as not to be overheard. I dread that there had been some muggings around my district, and wondered if I should call the police to report being followed. I decided against it, not wanting to feel vulnerable. I went to bed that night, thinking about those eyes. My Nicholas. Dare I hope?